I'm delighted to be coming to you today from Minnesota. So I thought I'd share something with you called keeping cold in perspective. At 65 above zero, Floridians turn on the heat. People in Minnesota plant gardens. At 60 above zero, Californians shiver uncontrollably. People in Minnesota sunbathe. At 50 above zero, Italian and English cars won't start. People in Minnesota drive with the windows down. At 35 above zero, New York landlords finally turn up the heat. People in Minnesota have the last cookout before it actually gets cold. 20 above zero, people in Miami all died. Minnesotans close the windows. At zero, Californians all go to Mexico. People in Minnesota get out their winter coats. At 10 below zero, Hollywood disintegrates. In Minnesota, the Girl Scouts are selling cookies door to door. At 20 below zero, Washington, D.C. runs out of hot air. People in Minnesota get upset. People in Minnesota let the dogs sleep indoors. At 30 below zero, Santa Claus abandons the North Pole. People in Minnesota get upset because they can't start their snowmobile. At 40 below zero, all atomic motion stops. People in Minnesota start saying, cold enough for you? Finally, at 50 below zero, hell freezes over. In Minnesota, public schools open 2 hours late. Unity began as a movement of healing and prayer. In 1886, it began when Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, our co-founders, were looking for a way of healing for Myrtle, who had been diagnosed with tuberculosis and told that she had at most 6 months to live. One of the things they did was they went to a lecture by a man named Eugene Weeks. At this lecture, Mr. Weeks said something that hit Myrtle like a thunderbolt. She had been told her entire life that because of her family of origin, she could expect to die of tuberculosis because everyone in their family did. At this lecture, Dr. Weeks said, "You are much more than a child of human parents. You are a child of God. Therefore, you do not inherit sickness." He told Myrtle how to use affirmative prayer to heal her body. And of course, Myrtle did that. She worked on it for 2 years and was completely healed. Then she began to teach others how to use affirmative prayer to heal their bodies and other things. And thus, unity was born. Healing and unity is based on the principle that we are all whole, no matter the appearance. Each of us is the image and likeness of God. What that means is that we are all expressions of divine love, divine power of creation, divine wisdom, and divine aliveness, the energy that is God. Eric Butterworth, one of my favorite Unity authors, said, "We in Unity see Jesus not as the great exception, but as the great example, because he showed us all the divinity in each of us. At our core, all the qualities that Jesus demonstrated are also in us. He was, in fact, what we all are in potential. The difference was, of course, he knew and experienced oneness with God's qualities every day. In unity, we call this awareness Christ consciousness, and it is actually available to every one of us. Jesus' ministry was filled with stories of healing. He healed blindness, deafness, and muteness. He healed mental illness, leprosy, and rheumatism. He healed paralysis, an issue of blood, and more. Each of those healings also has a metaphysical or inner meaning. Metaphysically, the Christ mind in us today heals us of mental illness. We could define mental illness as the belief that fear is real and love is not. The great Indian mystic Yogananda once said, "Everyone on earth is crazy." What he meant by that is that everyone on earth believes that fear is real and love is not. The Christ mind heals us of that. The Christ mind heals us of inner blindness, blindness to our divinity and to our oneness with each other. The Christ mind heals us of inner deafness, deafness to our guidance, which is always there. The Christ mind heals us of paralysis so that fear no longer immobilizes us. The Christ mind heals us of inner rheumatism as we release resentment and bitterness through forgiveness. Excuse me. The Christ mind heals us of inner leprosy as we stop being numb to our body and to our emotions. When we awaken to our oneness with God, there is no condition too difficult to heal. Does that mean physically? Yes, it can. But all physical healing begins with inner healing. Charles Fillmore said, "When the mind is healed, the body naturally responds." With that in mind, we could say the number one cause of premature death in the United States is dying of a broken heart. We call it heart disease. How does the Christ mind heal us of a broken heart? It says, open your heart fully to love. Many years ago, I was in a 6-month-long course in deep transformation. One of the tools we used in this course was a kind of deep breath work, 45 minutes of breathing deeply in a connected breath. In one of those sessions, my heart started to hurt so badly, I thought I was having a heart attack. Fortunately, the woman who was coaching me said, when I told her about this, she said, "Phil," she had seen this before. She said, "Phil, you're not having a heart attack. You're just opening your heart to love." And boy, was she right. As I continued to open my heart to love, I finally began to have an experience of unconditional self-love and unconditional love for other people. We could say the number 2 cause of premature death in this country is something eating away at us. We call it cancer. How does the Christ mind heal us of inner conflict? It says resolve that inner conflict especially through forgiveness. Several years ago, my wife Laura was diagnosed with breast cancer. The first thing she did was to ask herself, what is eating away at me? What am I trying to tell myself? What's eating away at me? And when she did, she realized that there was an unresolved issue. She began right away to work on that issue. And then when she finally had a lumpectomy, there were no cancer cells. If I asked you, what's Unity's basic principle? You'd say, just as you said at the beginning of this service, there is just one presence and one power in the universe, God the good omnipotent. That means that cancer, viruses, AIDS, and the rest have no power. There isn't God power and cancer power. There isn't God power and virus power. There's only God power. And we are all expressions of that one power. And illness isn't a sentence, it's a wake up call. In a wonderful book, Peace, Love, and Healing, written by the cancer surgeon, Dr. Bernie Siegel, he says, when I speak to 500 people with AIDS about the value of their illness, the gift and challenge it represents for them, and nobody tries to remove me from the stage, I know how courageous they are and how much they have learned about healing. Then he said, when I talk to survivors of a serious illness, I am interested in how they embrace life, not how they avoid death. Those who have learned to take on the challenge of their illness and share responsibility for their treatment have chosen the path that leads to peace of mind and healing on a spiritual level. This profoundly affects their ability to be cured physically, he said, as the energy formerly involved in conflict is set free, and the body's immune system receives a dramatic live message, replacing the former die messages that we were sending. If today you have an illness, the question to ask is not, what did I do wrong? And definitely not, why is God punishing me? Because as we know in Unity, God never punishes us. If you have an illness, it doesn't mean that you're a bad Unity student. We all have issues to work through and grow through. For some of us, our lack thoughts show up in relationships. For others of us, our lack thoughts show up in body issues. And for others of us, our lack thoughts show up in prosperity issues. As I was working on this message, I chuckled to myself, remembering a time when I was working out some lack thoughts about prosperity. Laura and I had bought tickets to the opera in St. Paul. And if I remember right, they were $90 each, so $180 for both of us. When we got, it was a cold day, cold night in January, really, and it was below zero. When we got to the opera house, we saw that there was an underground parking garage right below the opera house. The sign said it cost $10 to park there. I said, I'm not paying $10 to park there. And I proceeded to go around the block looking for a place on the street to park. Finally, Laura said, Phil, we just paid $180 for opera tickets. Do you suppose we could afford to pay $10 to park where it's warm? She looked at me, I looked at her, and we both started to laugh, realizing I was just working out my own prosperity lack thoughts. Whatever dis-ease issues you're dealing with, body-wise or otherwise, the questions to ask are, first, what gifts do I want to receive from this? And second, what is the message for me in this? Both Eastern medicine and Western chiropractic are based on the principle of inherent wholeness of the body. Taoism tells us The only problem with our bodies is that the energy or the chi can be blocked. And unity says, regarding healing, go first to God and then go to wherever God directs. In Matthew chapter 9, Jesus said, your faith has made you whole. Here's Eric Butterworth in Discover the Power Within You. He says, faith is the perception by which we can see wholeness where there appears to be sickness. It is the conviction that where lack appears, there is plenty. That where pain appears, there is surcease. And that in chaos, there is harmony. He continues, in sickness, there is wholeness, just truth and level of our being. In Matthew 12, Jesus heals a man with a withered hand and then tells the man, stretch forth your hand. Eric Butterworth, again, in his book, Discover the Power Within You, said, I'm so glad that this was included in Jesus' gospel of healing. It implies that there is always something for us to do. Again, the unity formula: first, ask for guidance, and second, do whatever spirit directs you to do. Eric says in another place, you must expect to be guided because we are always guided. And he says, you must be willing to move your feet. As someone once said, and I love this quote, I don't even know who came up with it, but it's great. God can't drive a parked car. No matter what issues we each have to grow through, and no matter what our body will someday die from, the eternal truth about us is that we are always whole and can't be harmed in any way. So along with following your guidance, the how-tos today are: first, accept your eternal wholeness, no matter the appearance. Next, commit to resolving inner conflict, especially through forgiveness, by making it a daily practice. Bernie, Dr. Siegel prefers to be called Bernie, says, as a cancer doctor, the most important job facing my patients is uncovering inner conflicts. He says, when they do, energy formerly tied up in contradiction becomes available for healing. Former die messages to the body become live messages sent to the body. Bernie says, don't try to not die. Instead, do your best to live fully until you do. He defines the healing of dis-ease as finding true inner peace and living fully until our bodies die. That means that healing is always possible. So this week, let it be all about healing any dis-ease you've been experiencing and being committed to living fully every single day. Ask yourself, what would living fully mean to me today? And then give that to yourself today and every day. Namaste.